Welcome, everyone. Excited to be here today. We have a really exciting panel ahead of us, just based on the conversations that we've had so far. You know, looking back the past months, days, minutes, I feel like every day something's changing between COVID, being on lockdown, everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter. You know, there's a lot weighing heavy on society right now. But, you know, as I look at my water bottle, I just got off because of TikTok, I just purchased, I realize how much consumerism and commerce is really intrinsic to the human condition. And you're seeing that there's this desire to still continue to shop. Now, what the implications are for what this means for retailers and brands, there's an opportunity there, and I feel like that will evolve. And I'm really excited to be joined by this great panel to really discuss what the future of retail is and where purpose really comes into that. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking because I really want to get to the panelists. So I'm going to kick it off with first Ari Wengroff from Afra. You know, Ariel, Afra, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what Afra is, but really in particular, you guys have this very exciting concept of co-pilots. Can you please talk to us about co-pilots and the collective and how you've really engaged your community?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Kelly, and peers as well. So ARFA is a personal care company. We create products and brands with people like you and me around the country. So pre-COVID, similar to this silliness of being in a car today, I used to spend a lot of time on the road and in motels, in people's living rooms, talking about their body experiences, because personal care is actually something that you probably have one of the deepest relationships with. It sees you naked more than anything else in your life, but you might not realize why. And so we have those conversations, and they lead to the development of the brands and products that we work with. And for giving us insights and being a part of the process in all of the key moments, our collective members, which is what we call these co-pilots, get profit share in the overall company. They get 5% of the profits because we believe they deserve to benefit as a stakeholder as well, in something that should always be bringing brands and customers closer together. And I think to your point about the world shifting right now with COVID, and then all of the conversations happening around racial injustice, it's just accelerating trends that people were already rightly demanding as consumers, and having more of a stakeholder and a seat at the table. And ARFA's aim has always been to be as inclusive and have as many folks feel like their voice is being heard from inception to output at the end.
Great. And what opportunities do you see coming out of this for retail with kind of everything coming up? Or do you see opportunities, or how are you guys approaching it?
I mean, for retail, it's really interesting because so many retailers pre-COVID were trying to enhance their customer experience. I think, you've seen 5 to 10 years of trends happen in the last 4 weeks. And we know that 57% of people have bought something online for the first time. But still 87% will drop off if it's a really challenging user experience for checkout. So there's a lot of improvements to happen direct to consumer. But for us, what's been exciting about direct to consumer is not just that you have an easier channel. It's not about convenience. It's what do you do with the channel? How do you educate the consumer or have a conversation with them? So for retailers, I think what's really exciting is something that might have been seen as more of an experience that you spend more time in is now more of a utility and a necessity. And so how do you actually listen to your consumers to redefine the store and the aisles that really haven't been touched in so long, which haven't allowed for category development or for people to really have the ability to understand like what they're purchasing and how it makes them feel as they leave the store. So I think it's an incredible opportunity for retailers to innovate, because if we've seen, the expectation that people won't shop online is changing. And that was only 8% pre-COVID, and now it's, going to be going more and more. So I think it's an exciting moment for retailers to really have to step up their game and not have an assumption that things are going to always stay the same.
I'd love to turn it to you. So we also have Natalie Bruss from Bruss & Co. So at Bruss & Co, you guys have a track record for making connections and seeing trends well ahead of the curve. So over the past few, over this time, we feel like we've been hit from every different direction. I'd love to know how you think or how you see this impacting consumer buying behavior.
Yeah, I think there's some things that we were fortunate to be ahead of the curve on. We invested last year both in Olive & June, which is a direct-to-consumer nail care company that's taking on Essie. And even that story, I think, is really unique. The founder is just this incredible powerhouse who everyone thought it was going to be Dry Bar for Nails, and got a lot of people that wanted to put in money for the next Dry Bar for Nails. And she said, no, I'm taking on, nail care. I want to teach everyone to be able to do their nails. And really it was this sort of an example, just like Ariel said, of being like the last 4 weeks have done 5 to 7 years of work. This founder was ahead of it. There's another founder of a company called House, which is a direct-to-consumer aperitivo. There's just, we were very lucky that a lot of these companies, we just believed in the founders and the passion behind them, but they did predate a lot of these trends. Now you see last week, Constellation Brands is buying Gary Vaynerchuk's wine company. So even in alcohol, which seems to be the last industry that can be disrupted amongst consumer retail, like it's all happening. And I think the ones that are winning are the ones that have really built customer loyalty and just a rabid fan base who want to support them.
Awesome. I wonder, do you think that there are any specific implications? You mentioned alcohol. What about luxury? How do you see a lot of these kind of things impacting luxury?
Well, I think luxury has always been about signaling to some extent. And I think what we're seeing in luxury is the products might be different, but the intent is the same. So it might be, the $400 Jenny Kane sweater that doesn't look like, if you didn't know that it was a Jenny Kane sweater, that, you know what I mean? There's a little bit of that in terms of really high quality, but there is, I think, much less emphasis on ostentatious. You're thinking about luxury also in terms of the things that are showing up in your social media now in your home. So cookware, there's some really interesting sort of food related startups that are blowing up as sort of food as a luxury item. So that's why you're seeing grills. REI can't, keep their shelf stocked with, kind of like luxury sleeping bags. So the items are changing, but the idea of luxury as a way to treat yourself, but also send a signal to the people that can sort of like dog whistle it is, I don't think has changed. It's just the items are really, really fascinating in terms of how the consumer behavior has moved to the specifics.
Awesome. So I want to turn it over now to David Di Bene. So you clearly are passionate about creating experiences. So whether, it's in store during your time at Apple or on the tech side at Google or delighting during your time at Toys R Us, I'm curious to know, what do you think retail experiences will look like post-COVID?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a good question, Kelly.
And
I'm glad we're having the conversation. To me, I think the first step is when consumers start to go back into stores and back in physical spaces, it's just, they need to feel safe. So first and foremost, it's about safety. It's about brands having really clear policies and practices that they're communicating what they're doing, how they're caring for their consumers and their employees, flexible sick leave, and everything that makes people feel safe to go back. And, I think that we've also been talking a lot about the move from physical to digital and, how digital commerce or e-commerce is going to take over retail. And I think that's not entirely accurate. I think we've seen, as folks have mentioned, so much change happening these past few months as people shift to online. But what's really exciting to me is that I see people want to interact with brands in deep and meaningful ways. And brands need to keep adapting their thinking, developing these new and authentic experiences, right? But I think what we're seeing is more of a blended approach, where it used to be you had your online team and your in-store, your physical team, kind of each creating their own practices and their own experiences. Good brands would have that connected and kind of work together. But what I like, and I see is happening now, is really kind of developing physical experiences that can be done at home, physical ways that you can interact with brands outside of the store or other places, so that we can still have that interaction happening. I think what we're noticing is that the good brands are blending the expertise of the team that was working on their in-store experience with the team that really works on online experiences, bringing them together to think through what can we do to help create these brand moments live in stores. Essentially, it's the blending of the in-store and digital marketing teams experience. And just a quick example of that is, the Apple stores do Apple Summer Camp. And over 15 years ago, my team and I there created that program, and that was always meant to be in store. Well, just yesterday, I signed up for Apple Summer Camp at home with my kids, right? So it's this taking of something that was always in store and really reworking it to be a way that can engage consumers and brands at home or wherever the consumer feels most safe.
I love that. I love that blending in-store and online. I feel like if ever time for omni-channel to be forefront for what we're doing, it's now.
Yeah, exactly.
So Sofia, we have Sofia Laurell from Teeny Organics, which is launched a traditional D2C brand, and you guys cultivate a really strong relationship with your consumer from the start. So I'm curious, as a D2C brand, how are you guys approaching retail, and are you taking this blended approach, and what does this look like?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks, Kelly. Yeah, so we are a organic baby and toddler meal company. The big goal for us is really to create a world where children learn to love vegetables from the earliest days. You know, if you look at the baby food category as a whole, it's actually a fully invented category, and a lot of the options are very sweet. So for us, it's really all around shaping those early palates to prefer savory, healthy foods. And for us, as you mentioned, we are D2C currently, but kind of omni-channel is in our DNA. And you know, we really believe in the kind of reinvention of the frozen aisle in retail, reinvention of the baby aisle in retail. And we launched early this year, and our goal was always to go into retail next year. And you know, it's interesting to see with retail, like, is it going to be, you know, you'll look at sampling, for example, and that was the best way for people to discover new brands in retail. Like, we've been thinking about, like, what does sampling 2.0 look like? You know, how else can you reach your customers? We feel like this blended approach is really good because, you know, we have really strong brand loyalty currently, and we're obviously a trust-based brand because we are selling food for your child. But this idea of, like, so we, for example, text with our customers. So could we in retail have our phone number on our packaging so we could know a little bit more of our customer that shops in retail? But yeah, definitely a lot of things in flux right now, like you said, and we've been one of the fortunate ones where we've been able to fill a real need during this time. But as a marketer, you're also, like, when COVID first started, I felt guilty. I'm like, how much, I don't want to take advantage of the situation, but ultimately you are helping people because we are D2C currently and fresh frozen baby meals. So yeah, but a lot to think about in terms of retail.
Yeah. And I want to throw this out to all of you guys, you know, with D2C brands, and especially, you know, we're on lockdown where you saw a lot of brick and mortar brands leading heavily into their e-commerce. What advice or argument would you make to a D2C brand in terms of why there is an importance for physical retail, or how should they approach it, or what is its core value in their overall strategy in reaching their consumer?
Well, if I may continue, like, for us, we have this lofty goal of becoming an American household name and really provide accessibility and not just be for the 1%. And I think for a lot of D2C brands, you know, they're not able to reach their everyday customer always. And I think that's really important, you know, to provide healthy options to everybody. So that's kind of, for us, you know, the crux of why we want to be in retail and kind of more accessible as well.
Yeah, and what I'd add to that too is with there's so many ways for consumers to get your product, but DTC, when you go directly to the consumer, that is the best way for you to control the entire experience. You can control every element with your brand and what you want to get forward. So for me, thinking through whether it's online or in store, the ability to go direct to the consumer lets you be in complete control of everything and get that message across.
I think too, I mean, yes, we're in, you know, for the next year, or, you know, until there's a meaningful vaccine, we're in a specific period. But I think the thesis of a lot of the D2C investment has truly been, you know, for retail stores, they're serving as physical billboards. And so I know, you know, when Allbirds opens a store, Allbirds digital traffic goes up as well in that area because people are walking by the brand, they're seeing it. I don't think that goes away. I do think that in the sort of near term, there's going to be a real opportunity for brands to get super creative about how they think about out of home as a version of that billboard while people can't go to stores. So I'm waiting for, like, all the mask vending machines that are wrapped in brand, you know, and I think that there are actually really exciting things that are going to happen there. But it truly is an opportunity to have that sort of, like, awareness that I think is just a different tack than a billboard, you know. I don't think that goes away.
It's funny, I spent my first 10 years at Estee Lauder, and I spent time in retail marketing, and a lot of it was really reach, right? Like, how else are you going to reach? Not everyone can kind of be at our Mac store here, so you have malls, or it's really access to a different, broader consumer. As I start my own direct-to-consumer brand, Asri Beauty, a cosmetics line, when I look at retail, I think about communities, and retailers kind of being representative communities that I want to engage with, and that could be online or in store. So I wonder how communities and your audience, or if that's something that even resonates with you guys with some of your own brand experiences.
Well, I think you're right about the fact that communities can really be housed in retail, and those had such a brand reverence. I mean, if you look back at Sears or Piggly Wiggly or some of the household names, and you see that now with Sephora, I think the question is, how will those legacy brands continue to evolve to bring in new customers? And what's always been fascinating to me is how many communities that are pegged as minority are also pegged as niche consumers, which I think the last month has really reiterated that that's just absolutely not the case, and not the way that businesses should be looking at how to frame or reach their customers. So I think, once again, it's just a really good opportunity for the retailers to evolve with that. Like for us, we've seen, our collective has always been conversations. They used to be more in person and now they're more on Zoom. But people are really craving small C community. They like the bigger.
You're breaking up a little bit, Ariel. We're going to come back to you because I think you're going through like a dry spot.
Loyalty programs for the retailers or the larger companies that provide it.
But what I think, maybe to finish the point that I think Ariel was going to make with a different example, my husband, who I sort of work across the basement from in this time, he's a big watch enthusiast, and he has been like doing these sort of like, they all make themselves a drink and they get on Zoom and they talk about their sort of reused watches and like the new blah, blah, blah. And it is fascinating how the company that he that it's both a media brand and a community, and they sell product, is Hodinkee. And I think that they're doing such an incredible job. You think of like what Matt Haranek is doing with William Brown and Yolanda Edwards with YOLO, and the idea that, brands and our media companies and media companies are brands, and that's never been clearer than now, when you have to sort of really think about the community engagement that goes along with it. I don't know if that's kind of where you were starting to go.
Wanted to add, we were doing these, they were called the Tiny Supper Clubs for like 15 to 20 moms across the US. So the whole plan was to do one in, all the cities, obviously on the coast and in the middle, and second tier cities as well. And we only were able to host a few before COVID. And we had our first virtual one last night, actually. And we were worried people are experiencing Zoom fatigue. But I will say it was about 10 moms that it was great. We did the breakout rooms, and I'm sure you guys have all done that. But it was really, I think somebody earlier said like this craving of human connection, and I think it just won't go away. Well, it won't be the same, but I think during this time period, and this will last, like you were saying, Natalie, for at least 6 months, 12 months, maybe more. So I think this idea is finding those communities. And for us, it definitely, we emphasize it's a safe space to share, but I think a lot of moms, specifically moms who are home with their children, working moms, like it's really hard. And I don't know if that conversation is being had as much as it kind of should be, which we heard last night as well. But I think, it's just very beautiful, beautiful moment.
I want to pick up on something you said, Ariel. You mentioned when we were talking about communities and how, we look about how we're segmenting our audience, and how, I think it was very easy when you had kind of big box retailers like, oh yeah, Sephora, you shop for beauty, I make makeup, and then that's where we're going to go. So, seeing maybe a slight divergence from that right now, where are you finding your communities, and what tools do brands have, or should they be leveraging in establishing their target audience? One, to be inclusive, but two, to make sure that they're relevant and the right fit for their brand.
Well, we typically find our communities actually through referral. I mean, once we started, it was like really, we didn't want to be on the coast because we felt like those folks were being really well served. But I think to your point, there is an incredible opportunity right now for everyone to feel like they have a seat at the table, and to not feel like you need to be excluded, or just because you're like beauty, you might not be interested in another category. The reality is those categories have so much more convergence than we give them credit for, and that people really want to get to know each other. They want to be a part of something where they're learning about someone else's human history or their behavior and experience. And so for us, that community building opportunity is non-negotiable for brands going forward. Particularly because you have to be a much more transparent business. If you're not being honest about the decisions you're making, from the manufacturer to the packaging, you won't survive, honestly, I think.
That's a great point. So, David, did you want to say something?
I was just nodding and agreeing with what Ariel was saying, and thinking about what brands need to prioritize in this new landscape. But if you had a question, I can.
That was it, actually.
Oh, sure.
That was my next question.
Oh, it was just thinking, like what you were saying, Ariel, as far as what's so important. It really gets me thinking that I think of it in three ways as far as what brands need to think through. The first piece is, brands have to stand for something and be authentic, because we as consumers are really good at figuring out what's behind a brand and what they're standing for. And, if the brand is about quality or experience or design or whatever it is, make sure that shows through everywhere, not just in various siloed aspects of the companies. And I think that the brands need to be really engaged in the consumer experience across all touch points, not just thinking through what's that product experience like, but how does that consumer interact with the store, whether it's in-store or online? What's the online shopping experience? If I'm going through tech support or going to do chat online, can that chat person, the chat agent that's there, respond quickly and authentically? A great example was I had a question the other day about a home lock, a keyless lock system, and I had a question. I couldn't get the answer. I sent an email. I thought, okay, they're going to respond to me with a whole series of questions before I get an answer. And anyway, I woke up the next morning. I got the email back, and there was my answer. It was a real conversation with someone who was trying to help me, which I think is really great and where things need to go. And then also, brands need to support their people and realize that the people that are working for those brands, whether it's in store or online, they represent the brand to the consumer, and they need to be thought of and treated as an incredibly important part, if not the most important part of the company.
I love that. We have just a few more minutes, but I just want to kind of talk about some of the things we've spoken about. Like, I love this idea of just really thinking about your brand and being authentic, understanding what your brand purpose is. And then thinking about community and, like, to Ariel's point, and really how you're listening to your community, engaging your community, and even being a little bit broader in how you think about who your community is, and not just kind of, pigeonholing yourself. And then also, to your point, and engaging them in every single touch point. And then the people that you have within your company, and how you're kind of using them as another touch point within your business. It begins to make me think then, what are the new expectations going to be with all of that emphasis on brand, on community, on engagement, on these conversations? What is going to be the new expectations then for the retail experience, and what role does that play in this kind of rebalancing of our ecosystem, so to speak?
My favorite, and I have no involvement with the company, but my favorite retail experience that I've had in the past couple of years was a company called Lunia, who Ashley Merrill, the founder, just actually joined the board to run Outdoor Voices. It's like a women's sleepwear, loungewear brand. They have one location in Santa Monica, which is where I live. And what it is, it's their office. And then they just took one extra big room and they turned it into their showroom. So when you have customers go in to do the fit, to do everything else, like, you feel like you're part of the beta group of this thing, and they have a bed. It feels like you're in somebody's bedroom when you're trying on the sleepwear and all this stuff. But it's also their sort of like kitchen conference area. So the employees that might be running marketing are coming over, and as you're trying stuff, and everyone, sort of all the women come around you, and they're like, "Oh, I love how you're doing that. You know what? It could be really interesting to do that in a future color." Like, it feels like you're part of the product development process. I've never had an experience like it. And it is just the idea that you can co-develop some of your best stuff with your customers, because right now, with discretionary spending down, it truly is all about customer loyalty and retention, and it's so much cheaper to extend a customer than it is to acquire a new one, just very broadly. And so how can you make people feel like they're part of it? And I can't wait for, like, in the fall for fashion, when it is, instead of doing like fashion shows for editors, we've invited some of our most loyal customers to see it, like, before it might even be ready to show to the public. So I think that there are going to be really exciting things that come out of this. But I think that idea of it feeling like a back and forth, it feeling like the conversation we're having on Zoom, where everyone's participatory, is incredibly exciting. And I think but I'm excited to see what comes out of it, for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I also love Lunia. And I think that that's core to how all businesses have to be. Involve the people. Like, listening today is a radical act, and it's not that hard, actually. But I think, to your point, Kelly, about what retail has to do with it, one thing that they can do is also take on Aurora James' 15% pledge. and take some actions to actually review who are the brands that they're working with within the retailers, and what do they owe their customers, and I'm sure the wide range of customers that they have, to make sure that the brands they're representing in their store represent all different types of people.
Amazing. Thank you guys. I'm sorry, Sophia, did you have anything else that you wanted to say?
No, I agreed with everything you said, and I loved what Natalie said just around like co-developing the products. You know, when we first started Tiny, we had this group of 100 founding families and tested hundreds of products with them and the packaging, and essentially co-built this business with them. So absolutely agree. It's really why we're all building what we're building.
And I think I noticed Emmett just joined, and I was going to say, like, I think Equal Parts is actually something that has also done a great job during quarantine. So the way it works is when you buy a set of kitchen products from Equal Parts, you actually get put on text message with a chef, and they have independent chefs all over the country that they're hiring to do this, but you feel like you can text a chef. And so what I did, which was incredibly impactful for me, especially as a working mom with kids, was I asked, like, what recipes are great to make with toddlers? And this really awesome woman who is a chef in the Bay Area texted me back, and we came up with sort of stuff that I could do that would entertain our kids for 30 minutes during quarantine, which is pretty much a priceless brand interaction to have. And so this idea of how can brands take this opportunity to really meet their customers where they are, whether they're working parents or they've been laid off from their job, whatever that is, I think that's where the real opportunity to sort of like bring one moment of bliss comes, for sure.
No, it's so true. And I feel like it goes back to like the title of this talk, right? Retail with Purpose, and how really, I think through everything that you guys have said through this time, like connection and community is really going to help redefine the retail experience, and really, you know, is another type of engagement point with that consumer and bringing them in and making them feel a part of what we're building and what we're doing. I want to thank you guys all for your time. This was a great conversation. Thank you.
Right, thank you.